Welcome, everybody. My name is Sami Kasab. I'm a research analyst here at Masari. I'm joined here today with Chiente Sho. She is the co-founder and CEO of Alex, which is an open source DeFi protocol built on Bitcoin via stacks. Chiente will be one of our speakers at the mainnet at Masari's mainnet conference, which is from September 21st to 23rd in New York City. Chiente, before we dive into your background and talk a little bit about Bitcoin DeFi and then a little bit more specifically about Alex, one question we've been wanting to ask our speakers in advance is like what their fantasy lineup would be, whether it's for a panel or a fireside chat. So like the two questions I'd ask you is who would you want to join you on that panel, and then what topics would you guys like to discuss?
Sure. Sami, thank you for having me today. Really excited to be on your show. So would you like me to introduce myself first or answer the question about the fantasy lineup first?
Let's do the lineup and then we can just jump into the background. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there are really many wonderful people. I'm sure you feel the same in this crypto industrial sector. And there are, I would say two female heroes of mine. I dream to be on the stage with them. Number one is Elizabeth Stark, right, the CEO of Lightning Lab. And the second one is Lynn Alden, is a great educator of Bitcoin. But I think for Masari mainnet, the conference itself, specifically talking about Bitcoin DeFi, there are three people I would love to be on the stage with them. So number one is Matt Zhang. Matt has a very interesting background. He used to be he used to run the Citigroup's structured product. What it is that you come up with certain investable product for the pension fund, particular pension fund, and asset management to invest in order to get well-diversified, well-designed yield. Matt left Citigroup. He is currently the managing partner and founder of Highline Capital, one of the biggest, I would say, newly launched crypto VC fund. Why I think he would be interesting to be on the stage with me is that I think he is a very rare intersection between TradFi and crypto, in the sense that he has his fingers on the pulse of where institutional investors, particularly the pension fund and asset management, what they are looking for, their challenges. And I think he will be one of the best to deliver, well-designed yield and deliver to those institutions. So I think that's number one. And number two, obviously, is Munib Ali. And I say that a lot of people say, oh, you're biased because Ali is built on Stack. But can I just tell you that Munib he's my personal hero. He's a genius, right? He's a co-founder of Stacks. His doctoral dissertation at Princeton under Professor J.P. Singh is the basis of the Stacks network. He co-authored Proof of Transfer Consensus. So his technical expertise would be invaluable to have on the stage. But also, if people know about, Munib's background, where he came from, and how he arrived where he is a very, very, I would say, is a very inspiring story. And I would love people to know more about that side of Munib. And last but least is this one you will laugh. I think you will like him too. Is Nick Carter.
One of my favorites.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
I think we cannot get enough of you, Nick Carter. Co-founder of the Coin Matrix, is really throughout the years generated so many great educational material about Bitcoin. Would love to have him, just not because he recently been punched by all the Bitcoin maximalists, but just want to have more. We can't have enough of you, Nick Carter. So these three will be my fantasy lineup. Is Matt Zhang, a bridge between traditional finance and crypto, DeFi, Munib Ali, smart contract on Bitcoin, and Nick Carter, great educator for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and if you're listening, Nick Carter, come back to Twitter. We miss you. Forget about the maxis that were being rude about you. But yeah, thanks for sharing those. Those were all great panelists, and I would be super interested to actually see all of you on a stage together. hopefully we can manifest that to happen. With that out of the way, I'd love to jump into your background. I'm fascinated by your background. You've spent numerous years on Wall Street. So if you don't mind kind of taking us through that journey and then eventually leading us into how you got into co-founding Alex.
Sure. So my parents are Chinese, mainland Chinese, and I was born in Taiwan, but I grew up in Vienna in Austria. So German is actually my second language. And Vienna is also where I received my PhD and then became a tenure track professor in economics. So I started in academia, I would say, my career. And I joined Wall Street more than 2 decades ago. I started at Credit Suisse and then Morgan Stanley, and always as a head of quantitative strategy, quantitative investment. In between, I also published a book titled Rule-Based Investing and published by Financial Times Press. So it's this is a funny story. When I joined at Credit Suisse, I went on the trading floor, tenure track professor, very arrogant, right? And I was looking at all these, risk-taking proprietary traders, and I was saying, okay, you know what? I think in a few years, the models, the computers, the quants are going to replace all these, discretionary risk takers. Everybody laugh at me, think I'm crazy. And look now, I say that, in terms of money under management, asset under management, I think the money under management via quant or via models, I would say definitely is higher than the one, on the discretionary investment. And this is why I think crypto or Bitcoin or DeFi is so exciting, because I started getting really interested in crypto. I was on the trading floor during the 2008 global financial crisis. I remember the smell, the feeling of that day. You experience firsthand and shortcoming when on the chat, on the, people on the phone, the very quiet trading floor full of angst, fear, that feeling, because we just don't know. There were so many unknowns that one bank will fail after the other. You don't trust your counterparties. Everything just froze, right? Why? Because there's really just a few things. Number one is that the whole system obviously is over leveraged. And one of the reasons why the whole system is over leveraged is this lack of transparency. One bank doesn't know really how much risk it is exposed to another bank. And just become, all this information asymmetry and cost to this, where we were. And then if you think about, Bitcoin and then the creation of a public blockchain, right? So suddenly you realize, and when I think about this, right, I still have goosebumps. You suddenly realize that this is the technology, right, that could solve all these problems of trust in people or in institutions by moving us, towards trust in math, right? And later we can talk about, proof of work, trust in physics. So that's when I start getting interested in the blockchain, in Bitcoin. So this is the professional level. But on the personal level, I think we talked about this a little bit before this interview. You know that my husband came from Senegal, and my mother-in-law still live in Senegal. And like many African country or emerging country, is a trickle-down economy, right? So my mother-in-law, she will support over 500 people who financially directly depends on her. So every time when we, the kids, send money to her, guess what? There's certain middlemen, not to mention, and then they would charge 8 to 12%. Right? If you think about 500 people depends on her, this 10% is 50 people that she could support more. And then there was a survey saying that every year, over $2 trillion is spent just transferring the money over the border. This is not the investment money. This is not risk taking or risk reduction. This capital, this 2 trillion, is just being there so that money can be moved across the border to benefit the trusted middlemen, right? And if you think about this, blockchain can make this monopoly on trust obsolete. So really, that's why I think from the professional level as well as from the personal level, that's finally April last year. I was talking to my wonderful co-founder Rachel. You got to interview her one day, and our CTO Chang Ang. I think he's a genius. Obviously, we start talking about it. We say, okay, it is really exciting, right? Look at the growth of a DeFi on Ethereum. The innovation is mind-boggling, right? You think about, AMM, compound. It's so exciting, but from the mainstream adoption point of view, right? There's so much to do. We really can contribute because of where we come from, because of the background. So that's when we decided that, rather than being the passive spectators, we would like to be the builders. And I think you start you start something, you are a startup. Most people will tell you, oh, go to look at the market fit, right? What does the market have? That's why you build. But I think our approach was a little bit different. We say, okay, what are we good at? What can we contribute? And we realized that we really could be the builders, but to make sure that the DeFi will be mature and to become a very viable alternative to what traditional finance currently is offering. So that's that's really our vision of Alex, stands for Automated Liquidity Change, is that it is a finance for the future, and that's the one that is permissionless and decentralized.
Yeah, and that's what excites me about your team, is because you guys do come with that professional TradFi experience, and especially after we've seen, we won't name any names, but some Ponzi's and some unstable types of mechanisms out there. I feel like people are really looking for now, professionals who know what they're doing, who are looking to bring existing verified methods over to DeFi. Thank you for sharing that background. So can you tell us a little bit about Alex now and how Alex came to be and what kind of the vision is for Alex?
Sure, and thank you for saying that, by the way. I'm really, really grateful because you are on our Discord, you see our Twitter. We are not that type of hype, like Alex 200. We try to be very steady. We try to duck our head and build. But one thing is also that we need to become better in messaging. Is that Alex is just not a bunch of functionality, and we talked about this before. Is that now it's more about the messaging, the education. So what's the use case, right? Why you need Alex? So I say the intro to Alex, don't take it the wrong way, right? We are almost like a Goldman Sachs, but on Bitcoin, right? Why do you say it's Goldman Sachs? Because Goldman Sachs is really from the TradFi point of view, is one of the best run financial institutions. But we want to be better. Why? Because we want to be really permissionless, and we want to be much, much more efficient, not be the middleman. And that's why it is Alex. You can think about Alex is a DeFi protocol, with all the transactions settled on Bitcoin. Now, this is very, very powerful, right? But there's also, I can see the punches coming over. What do you mean by settle on Bitcoin, right? So we can discuss that later. But first of all, why this is so powerful when you say you are all the financial services, but you settled on Bitcoin? Because number one, when you settle on a Bitcoin blockchain, right, you don't have counterparty risk, or you have very minimal counterparty risk, because everything is settled through smart contract. So that's number one. Then compare with the traditional finance, such as Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, suddenly your business become much more efficient because you have really minimal balance sheet requirement, because it's all peer-to-peer through smart contracts settled on Bitcoin. And it's permissionless, it's trustless, it's decentralized. There's just no other blockchain that is more secure than Bitcoin. So that's what Alex is. But really this is, we came to Stacks. We are one of the first protocol built on Stack. So we built a lot of, these building blocks, right? You need to have a DEX, you need to have an ideal launch pad, you need to be able to lend, borrow, etc., etc. but really the use case for Alex is that we want to make Bitcoin a productive asset. At the moment, most Bitcoins are just sitting on somebody's wallet or ledger, right? And then just sitting there, everybody's waiting for the price to appreciate. That's not what we think that can enable the economy to grow. We want to make Bitcoin a productive asset by offering Bitcoin yield through smart contract. So not through CeFi, not through some custodial, but through DeFi. And we can discuss how we do that later. But that's pretty much what Alex is a DeFi protocol with all transactions settled on Bitcoin, and so that you have minimal counterparty risk and your business has a minimal balance sheet requirement. But ultimately, Alex is going to offer you Bitcoin yield if you are Bitcoin holder through smart contract.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because a lot of Bitcoiners may say, okay, like why do we need some type of DeFi ecosystem? But in order to see Bitcoin mature, we need to develop some type of like mature capital markets, right? I was doing some research previously, and I think there's about like $10 billion worth of Bitcoin that's just kind of like sitting on the balance sheet of different companies, in treasuries, and even some governments holding it. And it's just idle, right? Like it's not being put to work, it's not earning yield. And that's what makes me so excited about Alex, because it gives you the opportunity to earn yield on Bitcoin. So I'd just like to quickly hear about like why you chose Stacks and why you think Bitcoin is that superior chain, for DeFi.
Sure, that's an excellent question. I remember when we first started, when we were meeting some investors, and said, "Oh, Alex is built on Bitcoin via Stacks smart contract." 1 hour meeting, 15 minutes is explaining Stacks, right? So Stack is, I would say, Stack is not yet that well known, but it is picking up. We have lots of materials that we'd love to share with your viewers. So think about this, right? So we like to say, 1, 2, 3, right? Just like you said, Bitcoin is a sound money, is a perfect money. Right? So that's number one. But then if you just hold it there, just like my mom's cash under her pillow, useless, right? You don't contribute anything, right? Or just like, you have a apartment, you don't live there. Instead of, renting it out, you just let it sitting there. It's useless for anybody. So if you want to make Bitcoin a yielding asset, the best way is to stack it, right? So let's say, so that's number one, is Bitcoin is a sound money. Number two, I see the jewel of the crown, or the most genius design of Stacks, is that if you stack the Stacks, you earn the native Bitcoin yield. Now, how does this native Bitcoin yield come from? Now, it gets a little bit technical, so I would love everybody to give me 2 minutes, okay? Just bear with me, and I'm still trying to perfect it, right? So this is called proof of transfer, right? So in the Stacks, let's say the Stacks ecosystem, there are 2 actors. One is the miners, and one is a stacker, right? So the reason why stackers, when they stack the stack, they receive a native Bitcoin yield, because the stack miners, they must submit Bitcoin, the native Bitcoin, in order to write a new Stacks block, okay? So through the proof of transfer, you write the POX, right? Bitcoin is sent from miner to stackers for supporting the network. And then the miners, what do they receive? Well, they receive the Stacks block reward and all the transaction fee, right? In exchange for the Bitcoin they committed. So the Bitcoin yield is not coming out of the thin air, right? There are a lot of, thin air design of reward. This is simply the fee or reward generated by people who using Stacks network. That's why when you stack the Stacks, you get the native Bitcoin yield. This is really the fee generated by using the Stacks network. So that's number 2. So now, okay, we have Bitcoin, the sound money. We have Stacks that can generate Bitcoin yield. Okay, so where does Alex come from, right? Now, in order for Bitcoin holders to receive this native Bitcoin, somehow underlying there are certain risks that you need to be hedged, right? For example, the exchange rate risk between Bitcoin stacks. This is where DeFi smart contract come from, is that all these hedgings, all these risks are covered from the smart contract point of view, right? So it's completely trustless, permissionless, and automated. So that's where I think, in the very simply speaking, 1, 2, 3 is that Bitcoin, through POW, the Bitcoin, where Bitcoin come from. Stacks is a layer on Bitcoin through the design of proof of transfer. If you stack, you get a native Bitcoin yield. That's the genius of the stack, right? Now, Alex would hedge the risk between Bitcoin and stack so that the Bitcoin holder not only get the native Bitcoin yield, but also their principal risk is hedged so that their Bitcoin is still their Bitcoin. That's how I would explain that why Alex is here, why you need a DeFi like Alex to deliver Bitcoin yield to Bitcoin holders. So now, the other thing I think we have been also discussing about this, that in the sense that a lot of people will say, yeah, why do we need stacks? Why do we need Alex, right? It's very clear that Bitcoin doesn't need DeFi, right? But if you want to build a DeFi, if you want to offer people this yield of Bitcoin, right, to Bitcoin holders, you do need a DeFi, and the best DeFi is built on Bitcoin. Now, if you want to build a DeFi on Bitcoin, you need stacks, because stacks at the moment is the only full expressive smart contract on Bitcoin. So again, this 1, 2, 3 relation is Bitcoin stacks Alex, or Bitcoin stacks Bitcoin DeFi, right? They are all kind of tethered together and become a very, very beautiful system to offer people Bitcoin yield. And the other thing about stacks is that security and transparency is very, very important for a DeFi, right? And we build Alex on Stacks blockchain because it's a smart contract layer that anchors through the shared consensus to Bitcoin. But Stacks blocks are also generated through the proof of transfer, as we mentioned. And this recycle the energy of Bitcoin's proof of work. It means that the Stacks leverage the security of Bitcoin. So every Stacks transaction is visible into the Bitcoin state, and Stacks at the moment is the only one that can do that.
Yeah, the proof of transfer mechanism is just so interesting. Like you said, it can seem very complex from like a surface level, but once you kind of start to dig in and understand it, it's the innovation there is just so fascinating. One thing I've found, or I've been realizing recently, especially for like maybe non-crypto natives, is there's been like a negative connotation associated with DeFi, right? It's a lot of especially after we've seen 20% yields that may have not been sustainable. A lot of people think that when they hear like yield farming or earning yield, they kind of just rub it off. But like you were saying, like the yield from stacks comes from like the actual use cases on Alex, right? Especially too. So like whether it's your guys' AMM or your order book. So can you kind of like talk us through that a little bit as well?
About the negative connotations?
Yeah, and then just kind of like how Stacks earns, or Alex will actually use the real use cases to generate that yield, from the different services that you guys offer, such as staking, swapping, and your guys' new order book. If you want to talk us through that, which was just released as well recently.
Yeah. So I know let's talk about what happened over the past few months. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, right? So DeFi almost become like a dirty word now, right? Staking, yield farming become really like a dirty word. But, if we recap what has happened, right? You remember those Ponzi makes you remember like Winterland or Olympus. You know,
Yeah.
you remember how much they were promising the return is like what 80,000% returns, right? I think those are gone. So sometimes winter is good. Winter is cleansing, right? All these Ponzi like type of projects or ideas that cannot generate actual like use case or real yield to the community. I think winter is good. It's a cleanse process, and hopefully most of them are gone. So that's number one. Number two, then remember the collapse of Luna Terra. I feel like just long time ago, but
Yeah. Feels like forever ago.
right, yes,
Yeah. Time goes by too fast.
goes by quickly, right? And but at its core, right, this is a kind of the unsound foundation of algorithmic stablecoin. I mean, obviously, this is everybody's dream to have a stable coin, completely decentralized. But I think by design, we are just not there yet, right? So, the aftermath of Terra depict many, I would say thousands of Bitcoin centuries were minted out of the appreciation for Bitcoin's resilience and immutability. So that's another, I would say, good outcome out of it. And then after Terra, it was Celsius. Right?
Yep.
The withdrawal pause, it failed, then completely. But I always try to remind people, Celsius is not a DeFi. It's a centralized platform. It's just that they invest in DeFi, but they place very bad leverage bet and blew up. So it's not DeFi. DeFi actually came out really, really well. So I would say what occurred with Celsius cannot occur with Alex, a DeFi like Alex, because a DeFi, everything is governed by smart contract. And we are non-custodial, so your fund remain in your wallet. So that's the biggest differentiation. So that's why I think a decentralized currency such as Bitcoin, it requires a DeFi protocol such as Alex to unleash its full potential through, trustless peer-to-peer user-owned finance. And again, if we come to this 1, 2, 3, right? Think about Bitcoin is a sound money layer, Stack is a smart contract layer, and Alex is think about it as a financial scalability solution that realizes the Bitcoin economy. Now, in terms of what people can do, what are the use cases on Alex? So we came to Stacks, there was nothing. So we need to start really quickly to build I would say primitives or road and highways. Like Trevor like to say, roads and highways, roads and highways, because Stacks has a very, very very interesting, thriving ecosystem, particularly the NFT community, right? If you're interested in NFT, Stacks is a very, very interesting place for Bitcoin NFT. So we need to build like DEX, ideal launchpad, Lambar, staking, yield farming very quickly for our ecosystem to use. But ultimately, again, we believe that the ultimate use case for a DeFi protocol like Alex is really to deliver this jewel of crown of Stacks to the Bitcoin holder, and that is a native Bitcoin yield. So, DEX, yield farm, launchpad, this we call it Alex 1. At the moment, we are deep into testnet of Alex 2. We also got our punches. People like say, why didn't you just start with Alex? Why do you need Alex 1, Alex 2? You evolve, right? Because the ecosystem evolve as well. You just need to see and grow, see where the demand is. So Alex 2, in order to deliver this native Bitcoin yield, we need Alex 2. And then in order to, the first, I would say the mission of Alex 2 are twofold. One is the speed. Lots of people have been complaining about stack speed. So we need to come up with a scalability solution. And that's an order book. That's currently is being tested on the testnet. We have, I think today, I was told by our foundation, wonderful foundation team, saying that there are more than 4,000 signed up to test our testnet. Just get people the feeling that, Bitcoin doesn't have to be like 10 minutes. Indeed, Bitcoin is a 10-minute block time, but you can separate confirmation from settlement. So you can have instantaneous confirmation, yours, mine, this price. but you still settle onto Bitcoin. So that's the purpose of our order book. So get people, get familiar with this seamless, simultaneous confirmation, but still settle down Bitcoin. Number two, so that's about the scalability. Number two, I think Alex too is also about user experience, right? And user experience is not just about the ease, but also about the security. We just hear every day there's some exploit, there's some scam. And I know my co-founder Rachel, every time she hears this news, she cannot sleep. We spend a lot of effort on the security, on the UI, UX, and security side. So that's, I would say, number two mission of Alex. But ultimately, we hope that by end of the year, we can start delivering a native Bitcoin yield for Bitcoin holders.
It's fascinating how fast you and your team are building, being just over, I believe, a year old, right? The protocol you guys have.
I would say less than 8 months though.
Not even a year. Wow.
No.
Yeah, to go from a V1 to a V2.
Yeah, we started. I remember that was January 18th. We launched our mainnet with only two functionality. One is DEX, AMN DEX, and the other one is the IDO Launchpad. And then it's a wonderful team behind this protocol. We have really our CTO Chang, who I know for I think close to 20 years now. We always work seamlessly. He just leads a team of developers, and they just deliver and really, steady, sound, top-notch quality functionalities. And Rachel, right? She is our COO, CFO. She holds the team together. And then we have lots of, we have a few senior people I want to shout out here, like Oscar, right? A very, very experienced product manager. We have Zitao, Mike, very senior developers. Marvin, who is, I think is, he's like, when we talk about clarity, there's nobody talk better than Marvin. And our foundation team, Hadan, Mark, Hero Gamer, Verna, there are more and more names that help us to, hold the community together. So I always like to say Rome is not built by one person. There's really great team behind Alex, this protocol.
Yeah, like you said, you found a great team. Really excited to see what you guys continue to build, continue to develop. I've been super excited. As a Bitcoiner, I've been super excited about seeing the development of Bitcoin DeFi. I mean, we both know that markets are largely narrative driven, right? So who knows, maybe the development of DeFi on Bitcoin could trigger that new bear market. We won't hear anybody call Bitcoin a pet rock anymore in the future because, hey, you can earn yield, you can put it to work, right? You can lend it out, you can borrow it. But thank you so much for joining me on this chat. It was a pleasure talking to you and just diving into stacks and specifically Alex. To close this out, I just want to let the listeners know that we do have a $300 off discount for mainnet, so you can find that link in the chat. But again, thank you so much, Chiente. It was a pleasure being here with you, and looking forward to seeing you at mainnet.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you for the opportunity for us to talk about Alex.